Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks, Sue and Steve, for a really fascinating set of presentations. And I think ours will hopefully knit a few things together and certainly add some concepts from the developer's perspective. My name is here we go. My name is Tim Jones. I spent the first half of my career working as a civil engineer. I'm a chartered civil engineer. Working in the design office, and for the latter half of the year I've been on the client side. So I had a stint with St. Modwen Homes, working for the house building arm of St. Modwen, and a couple of years ago I moved over to the strategic land part of St. Modwen. So I have experience from kind of multiple sides of the client side of development, and I'm joined by Jack Downing of Rapleys.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Jack from Rapleys. I work in the development project management team. Similar to Tim, I started my career as a civil engineer and also a member of the ICE. And we work closely with the likes of St. Modwen and other land developers and house builders to help manage, deliver successful outcomes for new development sites. And so delivery of SuDS is a key element of delivering good land development. So just a brief overview of what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about two schemes in particular, Millbrook Park over in Barnet and St.Andrew's Park in Uxbridge. We'll talk about the types of SuDS that are on those schemes and particular successes that myself and Tim really like, some of the challenges that we came across over the years, our relationships with local authorities, maintenance issues and things that will make things easier moving forward. So with Millbrook Park, just briefly, the scheme is just over 34 hectare brownfield regeneration. It was a former RAF base, just over 2,000 residential units with currently about 600 occupations on site. It's a free-form entry school, primary infantry school, which opened back in 2014. And then we've got a range of commercial units, retail units that will be coming forward in the future. We've got a district heating network that serves about 1,000 units on site and a permanent energy centre. And we've created 4 areas of public open space, which they all incorporate SuDS features as well.
The second site that we're going to use a few case studies from is our St.Andrew's Park in Uxbridge, another St. Modwen site. This one's a joint venture with Vinci in the London Borough of Hillingdon. It's a 1,500 unit mixed use site again, so it's got 1,500 units, retail and business opportunities, strategic open parks, primary school, and the next stage of site, it's about 3/4 through its development cycle, and next year we're looking to start on the town centre development, which will bring in some of those retail and businesses, and hotel and some commercial opportunities. It's about a 44 hectare brownfield regeneration site, also picked up from some of the RAF disposals that happened in the early 2000s. So this one started around 2011. As I say, we're about 3/4 of the way through the residential development. And I think we picked these two sites because they are good examples of certainly the way St. Modwen likes to develop out perform its master developer role on strategic sites, and it's got some really good examples in there.
So just looking at a bit of detail behind the schemes, the reason we picked both of these because they're quite modern. I think outline planning was granted around 10 years ago for both of the projects. So as part of that outline planning, SuDS and attenuation and surface water control is underpinned in there with good drainage strategies to help us deliver these schemes. And just some of the SuDS features that are contained across the both. Both schemes include permeable paving, swales, linear rain gardens, green and blue roofs, detention basins, as well as underground tanks. I think picking up on a comment from Sue's presentation earlier, they all vary in scale depending on where and the local constraints within these large development sites. And as part of what we do to support St. Modwen is deliver the enabling infrastructure, which the SuDS provides a key component of that. And both of these schemes can contain complex SuDS treatment trains, which we work with lots of different parts of the professions, consultant teams, planning authorities, adopting authorities, as well as the plot developers and principal designers.
So before we go into a few, we're into some pretty pictures, I promise, in a section, in a second. Just a little talk on the way St Modwen tend to take on our strategic development sites. So we are, the St Modwen business is split fundamentally into three different business units. We've got our residential developing arms called St Modwen Homes, a true house builder. We have our industrial logistics business, who build industrial logistics schemes. And then we have our strategic land business. So I sit within strategic land. So I think the key thing to bring out for this presentation is what we look to do is go in and take be it a brownfield site or a greenfield site, or certainly the development opportunity, and deliver some enabling infrastructure so that we can then create parcels of land that are ready for the next stage of development, be that an external developer. So we'll sell to the open market to another house builder, or be it ready for produces a piece of land ready for the school development, or we'll develop it out ourselves. So everything we do has that in mind. So our company line is changing spaces, creating better futures, and that is absolutely part of our DNA. We believe in the value add concept, and I think this is why I was very pleased to accept the opportunity to speak on this presentation, because building high quality SuDS into schemes very much is inside that DNA. We understand the importance of adding value, and if you do it right, it does creates the land value at the end of the scheme. It doesn't have to be a negative. So in order to get it right, you've got to design it properly, and we've seen some good examples of that. You've got to have a very clear design brief about what you're trying to achieve, and you need to be very efficient about how you integrate those SuDS features into all the other varying balancing constraints on development, requirements of development. You then got to procure it smartly so that you get a high quality product at the end of it. And then you've got to set yourself up to maintain it adequately, and we'll talk about maintenance later. The only headlines, just for now, before I put the pictures on, is for me, if a drainage network is kind of just looks practical, looks functional, then you kind of know that you can, it's going to work, and you know that you can maintain it. But that does not mean it can't be progressive and innovative. I spent plenty of time in an engineering office, as has Jack, working out how to deliver a scheme. You get the SuDS manual out, you get the ideas out, but actually just think about how drainage works, and don't be scared to have a go, because this stuff doesn't have to be scary. You do have to rely on tried and tested kind of case studies. But innovation is definitely key. I think the only other thing in terms of a master developer role is and if the engineers on the line and the architects on the line, think about how your client wants to develop out the parcels, because a good drainage network balances the requirements of strategic drainage and SuDS, soft SuDS within the blue and green infrastructure early days, because that's typically, certainly at St Modwen, what we want to install in order to service those land parcels. So you've got to think about liabilities between the third parties and your land, and you've got to think about programme in terms of when things will be delivered. There's no good having the strategic attenuation function, the volume attenuation function of a drainage network in a land that is a third party house builder's requirement. You can do that, but it creates complexity. So thinking about the balance between on-plot and off-plot is what I'm trying to get to, and the liabilities that presents. So we'll move on to some pretty pictures.
So continuing the theme of the providing the strategic SuDS features. So on the example on the left, which is the urban swale Uxbridge, is a very nice green feature. That go next to a primary road throughout the development. So this is really creating a sense of place when you drive into the development straight away. So yes, it takes a bit more land, but then it gives you that instant value there. It's wide, it's green, and it's practical.
Absolutely, and I think it's just an example of a good swale. It takes drainage directly from the highways gullies in this case, because there's an adopted road to the left of that picture, and it just works, and it enables us to manage the landscaping in amongst our other landscaping obligations on the site. I think the only negative from the developer's perspective on the site, you always have to think about land taking efficiency. So that length of swale does create the value, but it takes up a lot of land in doing that. So I don't think that's a solution for absolutely everywhere.
So I think that's a good application on Primary Street. So then we've got a linear rain garden at Millbrook Park. So this has been delivered on that scheme adjacent to secondary streets. So it's a nice green feature, but its land take is much further reduced. So it kind of matches with the reduced road widths as well coming through the scheme there. But again, it's a very similar concept in terms of how it works. It's over the top again, so there's no gullies, reducing the pipework in the road, while providing that nice green, easily maintained SuDS feature there as well.
Yeah, and I think the efficiency of the maintenance is something just to touch on, is that is a high quality set of landscaping. You know, there's a bit of diversity in the plants that are in there, but that once it's established, it doesn't take a lot to maintain that. I talk a lot to the managing agent companies who work for St. Modwen, and actually that is a high quality, high impact bit of landscaping that I'd want to live on that street, either of these two streets, but I'd want to walk down there, you know, as I was going to get the tube to go to work. It adds value, but it doesn't have to cost a lot. And actually underneath that is a French drain, and everyone gets a French drain. What I was talking about earlier in terms of, does it just make sense? You know, is your engineering judgment there? There's a perforated pipe and a gravel trench with some landscaping above it. The landscaping adds a huge amount of value. The French drain, the water percolates through it, so you get your water quality, and the attenuation is there because it's a pipe. So it's a simple system, both above ground and below ground, to both maintain. It works, it makes sense. I think that photo's probably been in 5-10 years, and we
a good 5 years.
Yeah, we walked that a couple of months ago just to take photos for this presentation. And if there were issues with that, they would have presented themselves. There was no obvious kind of siltation on the highway, good detailing, and it just works. For me, French drains with planting above is a great big answer for a lot of scenarios.
I think another part of this phasing we were talking about earlier, but you know, the practicalities behind delivering your attenuation volume. Another important part of that is getting the landscaping planted early, well established prior to your first occupations. Then you start to get the real value out of these spaces. So moving on to another couple of examples here. So this is again, so we've gone from the primary, gone to a secondary. This is right at the top end of the catchment now of our enabling infrastructure. So we're talking source control. So at the bottom left, we've got permeable paving at Uxbridge. You know, a great selection of block in the landscape. It looks really nice as well. But it's also, it goes beyond just a parking space. It's a good, meaningful area of permeable paving. So it's actually really effective in its deployment. It's on a nice flat gradient as well. So in terms of delivery of permeable paving, that's a very good example.
We've all walked past permeable paving that just doesn't look right. It doesn't necessarily, maybe it has a very small catchment. Maybe the levels aren't quite right. Maybe there's a slight lip on the channel curb so the water can't actually get in. This is, as Jack says, an example where there's a huge area of road going to a sensibly designed area of porous paving with not a gully in sight. It's a hard version, but it's a good version.
Picking up on Steve's comment earlier, it's been constructed well. It's working, it's operating very efficiently. So the next example is from Millbrook Park, so like a borough retention area. And we're talking about innovation. This is not just, up and over. You've got gaps in the curves there, and it's working into almost like rectangles in between along this parking boulevard with little gaps for pedestrians to walk through. So the integrated space, so it works for people that live there as well as providing a good solution for that area. It was going to be landscaped anyway, most likely, but now it's become multifunctional. to driving that efficiency and value out.
That photo is just named up to the developer. That's Countryside, who took one of the early phases on Millbrook Park, in case there's any, I doubt it, but any other clients or consultants for Countryside on the line. Good example there.
Yes, talking on challenges, and this is one of my favourite pieces of multifunctional space on any of the schemes that I've worked on. This is the panoramic park at Millbrook Park. So some of the issues we come across on this site, it's very steep topography, an average gradient of 1 in 12. So that's a challenge in itself. But then when on this particular place where we wanted to put a SuDS feature, we've got a range of existing trees that need to be retained. So you can see on the picture on the bottom, we can see the gabion wall. On top of that gabion is a set of trees that we retained as part of the development. As well as using trees, we had a considerable utility constraint. We needed to divert 932 kV cables as part of this development. So those cables run through the centre of that park as a footpath that are bisecting the site. And it also contains a leap. So how do we bring all these things together? We worked at the time, I was part of the civil engineering team, worked very close with the landscape architect and with the client to make sure that we could really make this area not only efficient but look great as well. You can see in the background of the photo that development is nicely framing this public open space. So we brought it all together, and it's just generated a very nice, very efficient looking SuDS feature.
The next slide is more or less just a kind of a case study of something that happened on Millbrook Park. So the image on the bottom left is an urban swale, it was called, that was part of the outline planning consent that Modwen took on when we picked up the scheme. And as we this is a flashback for me from 7-8 years ago in the design office. As we picked up that kind of detail and we tried to integrate it into the highway, we just kept coming up against kind of many issues, all of which led us to that kind of gut feel: is this the right solution for this environment? You look at that detail on the left, and Sue, just close your ears. That's an architecturally drawn construction detail rather than engineering drawn. So, when we had that designed out, all of a sudden there was a kind of a reinforced concrete slab connecting the bases of the two retaining walls. The approval in principle adoptable issues of both structures came to the fore, regardless of whether highways would or would not accept any long-term maintenance of it. If they did, what level of maintenance would they look after? So then you're talking about kind of effectively doubling up, and I'll touch on that later in terms of trying to avoid doubling up of maintenance costs. So yeah, long-term costs of quite a hard engineered reinforced structure. No real feasible way of integrating that to make that a usable space. You can see the detail kind of has a suggestion of steps, but that's not the kind of place you want to sit and have a look at the highway. The health and safety side of it, again, with the highway to the right, you're designing that as a barrier. Yes, you can make it so you can get in and out, but effectively you've got a little toddler trap in there, and a litter trap as well. So for many reasons, that just didn't hit the gut feel test, and also just very expensive to do. Fast forward to the right, and we successfully kind of went through all the kind of drainage strategy changes and did a Section 73 planning amendment to get that detail taken out of the outline and the Section 106 requirements. Was a bigger version of our linear rain garden. So below that is a large, forget the diameter, Jack, if you remember, pipe up, but a very large, oversized perforated pipe that has the same volumetric benefits of what the open detail would have been. And again, French drain, water quality, volume, and we get to plant it. So high quality output. Again, right solution for the right location. And even in terms of long-term maintenance, if there's any issues with that pipe, you've got a much better chance of getting in there without damaging either development to the left or to the right than you would have been with a very hard engineered kind of reinforced concrete structure.
I think for me, the urban swale is almost a hard engineering solution disguised as a SuD. Because the planting in the bottom probably not going to be visible from pavement anyway. At least you got the visual impact now as the linear rain gone.
Yeah, and we'll touch on maintenance later, if not the next slide. But if you're, and I'll talk through how Modwen goes about setting up a maintenance strategy for areas of assets that won't be adopted by any form of regulatory authority. But if you just think about how, if you were responsible for looking after those two features, which one would you be most nervous about pricing? Again, on the right, you've got your big pipe. You've got a pipe in the ground with water flowing through it, with some planting above it. On the left, you've got this reinforced concrete structure that's integrated to development to the left and to the right. And if you had to replace the thing on the left, you'd certainly cause more damage to the public highway. So just on maintenance, on the right of this slide, we just got a fairly typical, but it's all it really needs to be, a simple kind of schedule of what needs maintaining and when. And I think it's been touched on previous slides. So Modwen typically on our large multi-phase sites where we're putting in strategic infrastructure, we want the landscaping to be at a very high quality. That is in our DNA. And in order to do that, we have a management company that we employ to maintain that landscaping. The traditional kind of exit mechanism for St Modwen, because we don't look to be involved in a residential site 10, 20, 30 years into the future, is to set up that management company to be a residence management company. So at the point where sufficient residents living on that site, and certainly when the last resident moves in, St Modwen then sells their £1 or one share in the resident management company. It becomes a fully autonomous residence management company, maintaining any of the private features on site. So when the questions that get posed, what are the true costs of maintaining SuDS? And Steve touched on that earlier. How many of the items in that table are actually extra over? What are the frequencies? Cost certainty. For me, the most important thing is a good design is a practical, efficient use of both space and the actual engineering infrastructure that you're putting in just has to work. And if it works and it isn't over-engineered, then there's no reason to think that and we've got plenty of examples where actually that in itself is a cost-effective way of doing things. When you've got that and you've got good design, you've got good strategy up front, and you work with partners to procure the site, then you're in the stage where what you really need is cost certainty, because what we do when we develop our sites and we parcel up land for onward sale, we take, say, a 10-acre, 150-unit residential parcel to the open market, and we say, this is what we're doing. In brackets, isn't St Modwen brilliant? This high-quality environment, please pay us your top value. We will set up a management company to maintain these aspects, and the residents will contribute. So at that point, we will set a target cost per year for the residents to contribute for maintaining anything on that development site. And generally speaking, residents understand if they're given a clear cost and those initial cost estimates are good and they're not out. They understand that what they're getting for that is a higher quality environment, like Jack's Park. Put a picture back up. If they understand what they're getting for that money, then that is a very tried and tested way of maintaining private assets. Manage the landscape. So I think for me the main takeaway then is, and again there's another slide that Jack will touch on, the kind of regulations, and it's been touched on previously, is making sure that there are no additional kind of double bubbling in terms of costs of long-term maintenance. So I will probably click on to the next slide and round back on this.
So just touch on what will make things easier. In my opinion, I think the SuDS manual is in a very good place for design standards. I think it's very clear and concise, and I think most industries are very comfortable with how it works and what's in there. As I think that provides a great platform to deliver quality SuDS. I think for me at the moment is the adoption mechanisms that are coming forward, SuDS Adoption 8. We touched on it earlier. I was trying to do a bit of research prior to the presentation to see if any of the water companies are starting to upload advice. I haven't seen any to date, but I'll be looking forward to see how the water companies are going to respond to the delivery of SuDS Adoption 8 and how we work together with them to deliver quality SuDS and getting the right elements from them adopted, because we not necessarily want them to adopt the whole green feature if because we want to set the specification for the planting.
Absolutely. So I think that's my main takeaway from what will hopefully be more options for regulatory or water authorities to adopt assets in the future is who are the right people to maintain first a drainage feature, but then secondly think about a landscaping feature. And these schemes, which are fundamentally landscaping led, is it right that a sewage authority are responsible for maintaining that? Will they maintain that to the standard that the residents will expect, and that St Modwen as a master developer would expect? The answer to that question is probably not. So what I'd be looking for, and what we're engaging with the rollout to Adoption 8 and working with strategic partners in the water authorities is ensuring that, yes, the adoptability options are there, but the commuted sums effectively aren't double-bubbled, because the perfect world for St Modwen is I want my roads adopted by the highway authority, I want my drains adopted by a water authority, but I want any surface features that have an element of regular maintenance actually kept private, so we can maintain them to the standard we want the schemes to hit. So I think avoiding that double bubble in commuted sums is probably the core for me as a developer to successful rollout of any kind of changes in the industry that have really been kind of on the cards and promised since back in 2010 the Flood and Water Management Act first came out, and I did my best to read that back to front as a civil engineer, and we now roll through SuDS Adoption 6, 7 and now 8. I feel like the industry is moving in the right direction, but we need to have the options out there, but make sure that the water authorities are flexible, so they only really adopt what is the right thing to adopt, and not more. Okay, I think we're out of slides.
Marvellous. Thank you, guys. That's been great. So I think there was one question that I think might be worth asking, and that's just basically the composition of your team. So there was a question of how many landscape architects were involved in your work, in your schemes at Millbrook and St Andrew's Park.
Well, each scheme we set up a core design team to support the project, and there'll be one. So there'll be one for the master developer. There'll be one strategic landscape architect on both schemes, setting design guides that find their way through outline planning and reserve matters planning, setting design principles outside of planning. We then pull them through the procurement cycle. So again, I talked a bit about the importance of procuring it, contracting it right, so you get the quality. There's no point having a great idea and then building it badly, because if you built it badly, you're not going to be able to. It's very hard to get it back on track, and then it's very hard to maintain it to the standard you want. So our landscape architects, we pull through to the design specifications for the actual landscaping and maintenance brief for the asset management part of our business, who procure the managing companies. So yeah, one on each is the short answer.